Hello, everyone. I am Mara Cepeda. Welcome to another episode of Rappler Recap. And today I am going to give to you the highlights of Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte's address to the 76th United Nations General Assembly. And this is his last address to the United Nations General Assembly, the general debates, as Philippine president because his term is set to expire in June 2022, and the next UNGA, UN General Debates, is set to happen September of next year. And Duterte came out swinging at the United Nations in his 20-minute long pre recorded address to the world's largest diplomatic stage. He called the UN inadequate and a product of an era long past. He essentially also told the United Nations that it shouldn't be interfering with the Philippines in terms of the human rights abuses and the drug war deaths that has happening under Duterte's anti-illegal drugs campaign. And this is very important because Duterte addressed the United Nations world leaders today, just days after the International Criminal Court's pretrial chamber ruled that Duterte and his government should be investigated for alleged crimes against humanity committed under his bloody war on drugs. And not just that, even the deaths that have happened under Duterte when he was still mayor and vice mayor of Davao City because of his alleged links to the so-called Davao Death Squad. Duterte mentioned Duterte mentioned his warning, or Duterte issued his warning against the UN about its interference into his war on drugs. Right after he first mentioned that he has already instructed the Department of Justice and the Philippine National Police to review the conduct of the campaign against illegal drugs, and then he went on to say that recently, I think this is in June, when, or just a couple of months ago, when the Philippines and the United Nations actually finalized the joint program on human rights. So it's deemed as, according to Duterte, a model for constructive engagement between a sovereign member state and the United Nations. And this is where his warning to the UN came in. This is exactly what the president said. He said, meaningful change to be enduring must come from within. The imposition of one's will over another, no matter how noble the intent, has never worked in the past, and it never will in the future. How many more countries shall be made to unravel and descend into chaos before the powerful heed the simple lesson? It's masked in a lot of diplomatic jargon, but essentially it's Duterte telling the UN that we have done certain mechanisms in our own country to review the drug war, to look into the human rights abuses in my drug war. So you're better off not interfering into our own affairs. And this is something that we do not trust the Duterte government, because they have been criticized of really not disclosing the full numbers of drug related killings in the Philippines. And Duterte really has used the entire power of the state to discredit critics of the drug war and all other of his abusive policies. And we can tell that this is like his swan song of sorts, on the one of the last times he will be facing the United Nations. And you could tell that the ICC probe against the president is something that truly worries him, for him to make such a statement against the United Nations. Now, of course, moving on to the other topics that the president highlighted in his 20-minute speech, he also hit rich countries for hoarding COVID-19 vaccines. Duterte said there is a man-made drought of vaccines ravaging poor countries. And this is shocking beyond belief, according to the president. And he said that it must be condemned for what it is, a selfish act that can neither be justified rationally nor morally. This is very important for the president to say, because to this day, the Philippines is still struggling with getting enough COVID-19 vaccine supplies, so that us Filipinos would be better protected against the coronavirus. But what the president did not mention was that the reason why we're also struggling with supplies is because his government didn't act fast enough to secure those supplies. We know this. There were congressional hearings about this, and now and this mismanagement of the pandemic is really across the board. As you all know, there is an ongoing Senate Blue Ribbon Committee hearing about corruption issues about allegedly anomalous pandemic contracts. So this is not the problem. Isn't just that rich countries were hoarding. It's also because the Philippine government didn't do enough to secure vaccines for us. And of course, President Duterte raised the West Philippine Sea ruling before the UN. When he did this the first time he faced the United Nations last year, it was very historic in the sense that, Duterte has repeatedly belittled this, historic victory of the Philippines against China, striking down Beijing's nine dash claim over the South China Sea. The ruling states that the West Philippine Sea belongs to the Philippines and not China. The problem is, that's essentially the, international mechanism that countries like the Philippines has in terms of settling maritime disputes. But the thing is, our president right now is the one that disregards this. So in a way, Duterte raising the West Philippine Sea ruling and the before the United Nations is just lip service at this point, because just a couple of months ago he said that that ruling doesn't really do anything. It deserves to be thrown in the waste bin. And it, of course, we all know that under Duterte there's been a pivot towards China. He calls China his friend. And it's really difficult, especially for fishermen who are unable to fish in our own waters because the Chinese military ships are stopping them from entering waters they're supposed to be free to fish in. What Duterte exactly said before the UN regarding the West Philippine Sea ruling is that it should be seen for what it is. He said it's a benefit across the board to all who subscribe to the majesty of the law, and he also, in a way, criticized China. In a way, he alluded China, I believe, in this line when he said, "No amount of willful disregard by any country, however big and powerful, can diminish the arbitral award's importance." So if Duterte haven't been disregarding the tribunal ruling, then this line would have been very powerful for a world leader like Duterte to say in front of the United Nations General Assembly. But it's really lip service for Duterte at this point. And I think these are the major highlights that the president of the Philippines said in what could be one of his last addresses to the United Nations. Please keep on following Rappler as we continue following the United Nations General Assembly. Once again, I'm Mara Cepeda. This is Rappler Recap. Join us again next time.